We're live.
We're live. I was like,
We're
are you going to say something? Or
I think this might be appropriate right now, considering what happened to the North Dakota schools today when they played South Dakota.
All I do is win, 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 no matter what. Got money on my mind, I can never get enough. And every time I step up in the building, everybody hands go up. And they stay there, and they say yeah, and they say there.
It's fitting.
I mean, now reality finally, now football reality finally reflects real life, because we know the superior Dakota is the South Dakota. So,
I mean, it's the warmer Dakota.
Yeah, I mean, we got Mount Rushmore and the better Black Hills and
the better Badlands. Well, the only Black Hills.
It's like who is it? Was it Colbert or Jon Stewart who once called North Dakota the North Korea of South Dakota? So I think we, I can't think of many times. I mean, and of course now it'll set up as we get to talking these games. Now it's set up to where there's a really good chance the South Dakota schools could completely sweep North Dakota now, because Bison will have to come to Brookings. The Fighting Hawks have to go to Vermillion. So on that alone, you would favor both the home teams. So there's really, I mean, I don't know if it's had to have been a very long time since there was a complete sweep of the Dakotas from South Dakota's side, because obviously it was never, Bison were a little more dominant back in the D2 days.
Yeah, North Dakota was good back then too. So
yeah, they had good teams too.
I bet it's been a really long time.
Well, I know we promised today, I think when I tweeted that out this morning, that there would be some surprises, and we certainly got them, but not from the game that we're just going to start with, since this is the Jackrabbit Insider first. North Dakota falling to South Dakota State 42-21. These games have been kind of closer than what we were maybe expecting the past couple of years. Even though Jimmy Rogers, I heard him on the radio as I was driving I went to go shoot the Mount Marty game down in Yankton with Wesley, and I was listening to Jimmy on the post game, and he pretty upset they gave up the garbage time touchdowns. So he doesn't think it's a complete game, but I'll give him the complete game. They finally put it together for 4 quarters against UND.
Yeah, they really looked improved on the lines. You look at the offensive line and defensive line, just absolutely dominated the trenches. And it was from the get-go. They were all gas, no brakes the whole time. And it was just what you expected to see out of the gates. And it's not that they were bad.
The team mascot, boy, am I running late.
Sorry about that. Pulling up the box score, and ESPN always has some stupid turn my volume down. Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah.
No, but it was a hammering.
Really was. Well, you guys were both there. I just for everybody's sake, I had to go to. I did the Key to the City game with Augustine and Sioux Falls because I wanted to make sure we could stick around and get a comment from the winner, and then I was going to go shoot another game. And plus, our new shooter Sam Tastad, I kind of wanted to give him one chance to go shoot an SDSU game this year because I always usually keep him in city. So So it worked out good, but you guys were there listening to it, looking at it develop online. Was it even after UND hit that long drive, did you ever really feel any doubt at that point? Because, I mean, they still had to get a 4th and 1 where it looked like they might have fumbled anyway to score.
No, the 605 Hogs and Isaiah Davis really had their way today, and Amar Johnson too. But Davis was a man on a mission. I think that's fair to say, don't you, Brendan?
Oh, he ran like he was possessed. And when they interviewed him in the post game, he was talking about how much it meant to him that they were that he hadn't had a chance to play against them yet. And apparently he really took that to heart, and he absolutely hammered him. And I know we looked at each other in the stands and we're like, yeah, this is an Isaiah game, because you just end up with those games where it's an Amar game, it's an Isaiah Dave game, and it was an Isaiah game. And the killer that just made it so there was not going to happen was Mark Gronowski. When we got in 3rd and long, he converted. They converted almost every one of them. And it was just, I mean, you convert a 3rd and 18. you're having a pretty good day. And the Hawks' one drive that they really scored before garbage time was such a struggle for them. It really didn't feel like it was in doubt at any point.
Yeah. Looking at the numbers, by the way, for Davis, he didn't even really carry that much, 16 times for $130, but again, you don't need to. And of course,
look at his average, though.
Yeah, but he averaged 8 yards a carry, 3 touchdowns. Mar Johnson, you mentioned, he goes 13 for 56. Angel Johnson got in toward the end and hit a 50-yard touchdown. So he had 2 carries. You want to talk about averages? 2 carries, 58 yards, 29 yards a pop isn't a bad average.
No, it really isn't. You got to go back and check out that stiff arm that he had on that second touchdown Isaiah had going into the end zone. I don't know if you caught that yet, Zach.
I think I did, yeah. I'm putting the highlights up now that we ran just a little bit ago here on KDLT. Or
you
KDLT
just keep stealing souls.
Yeah, I mean, but you kind of knew this was coming from Isaiah. They really didn't take him out of the – I've heard a saying there, they didn't really take him out of the garage that much during non-conference, and they didn't really need to against Western Oregon and Drake. Montana State, you could kind of see him getting on track, but the whole team started so lethargically in that one that it was kind of a, I don't think anybody necessarily was on their best game, but he looked good against Montana State, and I think you knew when the game started to matter, you'd see the best out of him.
Yeah, the O-line is just hit that stride a lot sooner than they did last year, where it seems like they're all clicking together as a unit. Where it's not like they were bad early in the year or anything, but boy, when they click like they did today and they're all firing together, man, that is a nasty machine to try to stop. It was, God. I mean, when you score a touchdown on a drive, you have 3 or 4 penalties on. Are you kidding me? That's absurd. That's not a thing that happens. If you do that, you're just pushing them around. And yeah, it was a fun day to be a Jackrabbits fan. That's for sure.
Yeah, still some room to clean some stuff up there, like you're pointing out too. So,
absolutely,
you get a win that dominant of a win. With room for improvement. Watch out when we make those improvements. That's all I got to say. That this team's still kind of gelling, I think, a little bit. So.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say look at the penalties that's probably the big one you look at right now. I know Jimmy was pretty critical of that late game stuff, and we had a comment about that, but that's Jimmy. He's really, which I kind of like from him. He maybe, nothing against Stig, but maybe he pushes them a little more because he's the young, he's got a little more fire in the belly at this point. He's the younger guy. Maybe with time, Jimmy will mellow, but as somebody once told me, no, I don't think so either.
He's just an intense dude.
Well, it was funny. I saw him in a playoff game, one of the playoff games last year. Maybe it was the 21 run. I don't remember, but we were in the elevator going up to the press box together, and said hello. He said, nice day. I'm like, he just had this look like he was going to kill someone in the press box. and we're going up. I'm like, I hope I didn't piss him off. And then I mentioned that to an SDSU assistant later on. They're like, oh yeah, that's his happy face. So
it's like he said in his first interview they ever had with him. I think he was getting interviewed by Tyler, and he said, "That's just my face.
That's just my face."
So now my wife is taken to calling wrestling bitch face Jimmy face.
And his mom had to explain it when he was a kid. No, he just looks like that. That's just how he looks.
I think I heard something in a Matt Zimmer column too when he first spoke to him. He's like, it's because I frown a lot or something. I don't, he has young kids, so obviously you see a different side of him when he gets around his kids, and like I said, to me it's like that scene from there was a movie Gridiron Gang where they had the Rock was a coach, and then eventually he comes out dressed in pads, and I feel like that's what Jimmy wants to do, but probably knows better than to do at this point. But he's really not that far removed from playing. He's only 34, 35.
We have an incredibly young staff across the board.
Yeah, I think they're the youngest at any level almost of college football. Maybe Division III or somebody has a younger staff, but certainly Division I.
Brendan was talking before we went on about how Jimmy's just a quote machine, and the one that he had at Postgame. I'll let you take it. It was great, though.
Tyler asked him about the decision. He's like, "What made you make the decision on 4th and 1 to go for it?" And he said, "Scared money don't make money." And for I've heard everybody's heard that phrase, but for a coach to just and that was all he said about it. So for
it was very.
Drop that.
And then, I didn't hear it. I didn't hear it because I was on the road. Like I said, I was kind of you're on the road in the middle of nowhere, and you're kind of making a turn or something. I heard a really short answer, and Tyler's like, "Well, okay."
Yeah, Tyler's like, "Well, scared money don't make money." All right, he didn't know what to do with that, and that's funny.
That's like a
Tyler
pimp,
almost
man.
always knows how to expand on things, but
yeah, that's I love Stiggy, but he's not giving you that answer.
No.
But I think that's maybe one thing that's worth talking about with this staff. They're seeing Sacramento State just hung on. We'll get to the other ones later. I'm already seeing a lot of comments about obviously what happened up in Fargo, which we will definitely get to. But it's one of those differences with this staff. And these guys were kind of running a lot of the show and recruiting and stuff, period, even when John was the head coach. But I think some of this youthful energy really kind of helps them. It's just you do feel the different vibe. I feel like maybe they're getting pushed a little harder. I don't know, but that's just an outside observation. I don't know if it was probably just as much the same, but now with Jimmy being the front man for the program, maybe we just see it a little more now that he's kind of running the show, so to speak.
Yeah.
I was wearing red and blue tonight, everybody, so you can't claim that I was favoring one team or the other. That's my tradition. I will usually wear the red and blue, so nobody can say I'm being a homer to one of them. And then when they play each other, whoever wins, I wear their tie, their color.
Yeah, don't want to piss off that one USD fan.
Well, they might actually have some grievance this year to want to see their team more. I got people last year. I had people saying I never showed them, and there was this one guy. I think I sent him a link to every single game, and I told him, I'm like, my team in FBS went 3-8, and I don't really want to relive that. But if you do, here you go. Here's every single game, and it was. Let's just say it was not fun reliving that March. So, but at the end of the day, you couldn't say we didn't run every single game of a 3-8 or 3-9 season. But a little different this year,
right.
At least at the start. Mark Gronowski, he kind of had light work today anyway. There was, it was mostly the run game, but 13 of 22, 167. He had a touchdown to Jackson Yankee. I think the other big takeaway probably too is Adam Bach came back and looked pretty good. 100%. Got a sack right away. They didn't really have that much they didn't really get too much of a pass rush during the non-conference, but that was similar to last year too. I don't think they had a whole lot of sacks in non-con a year ago. So, big takeaway other than the fact they took care of business the way you would want a number one team to do so against what I think could still be a pretty decent UND team. Again, when we talk about NDSU coming up here, if this really could be the year UND finally gets them they got them up in Grand Forks. But I think that's the other big takeaway is they're getting healthy now. I know Jaden Yankee was out there. But with Adam Bach back, it just changes that defense. And even that touchdown where they, like you said, even the touchdown, they nearly stopped them on a 4th. And how good is their goal line defense right now? With what we saw against Montana State. They might not be as dominant yet the way they were a year ago, but when they have to bow up and get a stop, they usually do.
Yeah, and that was huge. And from where we were sitting, we thought maybe it was out of his hands when he went, but you just don't have the camera angles at this level.
Yeah, ours is in the back of the end zone, and it's kind of the same thing. We're at the back, you can't really tell. You can't see if it broke the plane before it gets knocked out. I'm a little surprised they called it just because of the fact that if you're at home, you feel like they're usually gonna. It's kind of 50-50. You feel like they'll probably go for the home team. Like if it had been if it had been in Grand Forks, they're certainly calling it a touchdown. But you figure in rookies, they'll kind of go with the crowd, and then maybe they'll reverse it if they have to on a replay. But, and I think, I guess one other takeaway I can really add, we've been seeing this in non-conference, and we saw it again. Tucker Large, I think the punt return. If there's been one nagging thing with this program over the last couple of years, how many times have they had at least one fumbled punt or one miscue? And, I remember, I can't remember if it was Jackson or Jaden kind of settled that position down a little a year ago, but man, he looks for a guy who's playing safety too, for a D-back to be
Right.
this good on a kick return, that's a new weapon for them.
Did you happen to catch the kickoff return that Wildy had that got called back for some?
Oh, I didn't catch that one. No.
Yeah, no. Wildy looked fantastic. What was that, Brendan? 45, 50 yards?
Yeah, he took
Return?
out 2 or past the 50.
Yeah.
You know, and it's funny, you were talking about, you know, you feel like that call the goal line goes SDSU's way because it's at home, and it didn't. We got one our way big time before the huge punt return of Tucker Large. He fumbled on that punt right before, but they called an inadvertent whistle on that play and had to repunt, and that was a big deal. Like that was not it wouldn't have changed the game. It wouldn't have changed the outcome or anything. UND might have got another touchdown, but holy cats, that was a tough break going. It was a great break for SDSU. But an inadvertent whistle to lose a turnover like that.
Yeah, that's
potential turnover. We don't know that it was 100% a turnover, but yeah, it looked like it was going to be a turnover.
And yeah, I think another one too. Maybe an unsung MVP was Quentin Christensen. I kind of heard them constantly calling his name at the on the broadcast. Again, I didn't see the whole game, but especially with a veteran offensive line like this, and I think he's from, I want to say Woonsocket, maybe. I can't remember. He is a local guy. I know that.
Yeah,
much.
He's from South Dakota. I don't know where.
Yeah, I think he was a 9-man. Oh, they might actually be 11B now. There's a side note. There's too many damn classes in the state. So
yes.
Just another. They've got. You're seeing the veteran guys, but you're also seeing the younger guys really start to emerge. And this is still early, and there's still a lot to clean up. And man, if this thing gets clicking and they stay healthy, they're going to be really tough to beat. They're going to be tough for a lot of teams to hang with at a point. But they look good. I guess if you have any other thoughts, obviously the next one for South Dakota State will be next Saturday. It'll be I guess we'll be doing this after a game, although it's a 6 o'clock game. But granted, you guys won't have to, unless you guys are actually planning to go to Normal. I don't think we'll have.
I heard it's not easy to get to.
Well, it's still not as bad as Western Illinois, which will no longer be a thing here very soon. But the Redbirds were off this week. They're off to a 3-1 start. They do actually have a conference win under their belt. That was They won at Western Illinois. Nothing real impressive, though. They beat Lindenwood, who's just transitioning up now to FCS. Beat Dayton, and they lost at Eastern Illinois 14-13, which is kind of that sticks out like the sore thumb. I think they still have Zach Annexstad, who was that Gopher transfer, but they put up good offensive numbers against bad teams. But to get 13 points against Eastern Illinois is a red flag, and that was, of course, that was what cost them a year ago. They had no offense last season. They had that great defensive. His name escapes me. I think he was the player of the year defensively.
That was number 5. What was his name?
Yeah, number 5. I remember him because he had a great game against SCSU. He damn near killed Mark Gronowski on a blitz.
He's an absolute stud.
Yeah, but if they'd had any offense on that team a year ago, they might have been a playoff team, and they didn't. The Gopher transfer has not really been great, and that's kind of been their MO with SPAC. They love to bring in the transfer quarterbacks, but this is, again, SDSU is in a different place than they have been in the past, but it's always been kind of a tough trip down there for them. It's never been an easy game. I remember when James Robinson, I think, was just getting going. They lost a game down there pretty badly. At Illinois State.
That's it.
Yeah. It's like you said, it's not an easy trip to get to. I'm guessing Illinois State might have this might be their homecoming, so that maybe they'll try to get their biggest crowd out of the year out there. But a 6 o'clock start, it's a little later, but it's still the kind of game you would expect. Again, they're in a different place than they have been in past trips, so it's the kind of game you would expect a consensus number 1 to take care of on the road, even if no matter how good Illinois State is or isn't. But that will be, by the way, at 6 o'clock. So let's get to the surprise of the day. I think I was on. I think when we were on 2 weeks ago, I think I said I kind of thought USC would have a chance to compete with them. I didn't have them going wire to wire, never trailing, and I mean, this was their first win in Fargo since 2015, and that was the Joe Glenn game. Carson Wentz I think he played through an injury, but we found out he was out for the rest of the finger thing. They got down 14-0 in that game, but ended up rallying. They kicked the field goal to walk it off. That was more. I'm not saying it was a fluke, but this one was. I mean, they earned this one today. They were the better team, start to finish. NDSU made their run, which you knew they were gonna at the second half, and the Coyotes held. I mean, there is no question they earned that win, and to me, that's a bigger one than what they did in 2015 because, obviously this one comes earlier in the year and you can really build off it. But I mean, there's a lot. I mean, what was the reaction in the stadium? I don't remember. I don't know that they ever really read too many scores off on the. I've never really seen that before, but that had to start filtering through the crowd when people were seeing that score a little bit.
Yeah. I don't know. It didn't filter through too much. Like, I mean, we noticed ourselves and all that, but it wasn't like there was a general murmur in the stands. But I think if you'd asked anybody, they knew about it. And I feel bad because I turned around. It was right after UND scored, and I turned around to the UND fans and I said, "Hey, don't worry. No matter what happens, NDSU is losing." And they were high enough up. I think they might have misinterpreted it as me yelling at them like, "No matter what, you're losing." So hopefully not.
That might have made the UND folks better because the few Fighting Hawks fans I interacted with, I think they were kind of come to terms with they was probably not going to go their way today. They would have been pretty happy if the game had been as close as it had been in the previous years. I think I still think they've got a decent team. I mean, Northern Arizona we saw last week beat Montana and they looked pretty good. UND got a good win over them. We'll see what they do in conference play. I think it'll be tough for them to go to Vermilion and win now. But like I said, with what I saw from the Bison, might be time for UND to finally beat them. And it's going to be in Grand Forks. I'll have to look at when that is as I'm pulling up my stats here. But, yeah, I mean, I guess the first off with the Coyotes, I mean, the two things I thought were going to be key for them, the stat that just amazed me, the last 4 straight games they had played in Fargo, they gave up an opening drive touchdown to the Bison, like clockwork. Every time NDSU just waltzed down the field and easily scored. And they did survive it in 2015. Again, that was kind of the thing where Wentz gets hurt and their offense just went haywire. But with Nielsen, who's been the last 3, it's always – and they even got out to the lead in 2017 when they had Strevler up there. They got a touchdown right away on the first series, but then it was all NDSU. This one, they went out right away. They hit a touchdown. And boy, NDSU's defense, I think I retweeted that video. It was just a little throw in the flat. Bell, who's a good speedster, he gets past 2 guys basically at the line of scrimmage, and there's no one there. It's like it either totally caught NDSU off guard or they're just that slow.
They were really stacking the box on my rewatch. And the other thing they did is they continually shot themselves in the foot with penalties. It was a very sloppy first half for NDSU.
Yeah, and getting to my point though, they Bison got the ball and they marched downfield. They got it down to about they got it inside the 10. They had a play where they got down to like the 2. I think Miller got sacked, and then on 3rd down, he appears to throw a touchdown, but they called a penalty on North Dakota State, which backed him up even further. So instead of getting a touchdown to tie like they've done in every series, it's a field goal. It's 7-3, and that to me was a big thing right there because it's like every time they've gone up there, they just get knocked back right away, and it's the snowball rolling downhill. And this time, with the penalty did help, but they also, like I said, they got the sack. It was a long drive for NDSU. They needed 16 plays in 10 minutes to get a field goal. I mean, you hold them to a field goal. That's a big win when you make a team use that much time. Then they get the ball right back, and USD goes on an 11-play, 78-yard, 6-minute drive where they're mixing the run and the pass pretty well. They got a touchdown there. Bison got the ball back. Miller throws an interception, and they hit, and the Coyotes hit another 50. This was a true 52-yard bomb. It wasn't the flat thing. They killed. I mean, Bauman just boy. I mean, you can. If I could really sum up the difference between USD this year and last year, probably should have had Bauman starting from the beginning last year. I mean, 100%. I know they're always going to have a special place in their heart for a certain play that Carson Camp made, but and I don't know what Camp's going to do at Sacramento State. Maybe he'll get a shot, but Bauman is just a different cat. I mean, and he only threw 12 passes today, but he completed 10. I mean, just good. He showed a lot of poise. That allowed them to kind of open up the run game a little bit because we kind of speculated on here that we don't know if USD's line hadn't looked that good in the non-conference. They didn't really run the ball that well until they emphasized it against Lamar. Up 21-3 at half, and then it was somebody said here it's not a fluke, and I see Ron Lowney saying you can run on India. I mean, you can do just about anything you wanted on NDSU today. That does not look like a team that's going to be 10-1 or 9-2. I'm not saying that, they recovered the last time they lost to USD, but they're in some trouble. That they've got issues there, and I think for USD's part right now, they're easily a playoff team. I mean, unless they just fall on their face, they're a playoff team. When you win that game, they'll be in the top 25 this week. I wouldn't be shocked if NDSU falls down to 10. Maybe somebody keeps them in the top 10. I don't know. But, boy, I mean, it's really setting up to where I texted you earlier. I DM'd you after that game. There's the in-state game, the state U game is suddenly a lot more interesting because, again, both teams have to take care of business, and, that's not a given yet for USD either because they're, obviously they're just kind of rebuilding a little bit, but it's looking like they are both going to be they could really both be undefeated when they play at the Dakota Dome here in 4 weeks. And I mean, you guys know the history of that rivalry better than me if you were from the D2 era. I can't imagine if both of them are undefeated going to the Dakota Dome. That's not the biggest game in the history of the rivalry, at least with the biggest stakes.
Well, at minimum, since it restarted in the FCS.
Yeah.
The interesting thing to me, like Zach McKinnell points out, how many voters will have South Dakota over NDSU in the top 25? Not many. And realistically, if you sit back and look at their resumes, that's tough. USD's
I know.
In the FCS, they've beaten NDSU head to head, but NDSU's got a couple top 25 wins. But
they still deserve to be. Yeah, USD shouldn't hop over NDSU in the first poll. I mean, that's one. It's just one performance right now, and you're right. I mean, the Coyotes. I mean, they did at least have an FBS game, and the score didn't look great, but I didn't think they were terrible. I mean, you saw some signs against Missouri that there were some good things there, and Missouri's been a little better than what was expected this year. The Coyotes still have a lot to do, but their schedule lines up now. They're home next week for their homecoming, the D-Days, with Murray State. That's going to be a win. I mean, although we've seen them kind of take these. It's funny that they came out on fire because you mentioned this to me, Brendan, that it was they've gotten off such bad starts, and then you see them just running down the field at will on NDSU. It's like it was completely the opposite of what they had happen. But I just kind of goes to show you, I think some of these not just how I don't take that much of non-conference I take it with a grain of salt. Because just some of these games, like when you get a Montana State, okay, you're gonna see SDSU put everything they got into that game because the stakes. If it's an FBS game, yeah, they're gonna do what they can. But I don't blame them if they don't get up for playing Western Oregon or Lamar or St. Thomas. It's just get through it, win. Probably don't want to show too much, especially with a new offensive coordinator on UNC's side. When you get into conference is when you start to separate and see because now the teams know each other. There's a little more. There's the familiarity. You're not now. Now you start to see if it's real, and we'll see. I mean, they have to take care of Murray State. Then 2 weeks they get another home game with Youngstown, which could be very interesting. That's not going to be easy. Again, you figure on your home field, you take care of business. And then they go to Indiana State, which, again, should be a win. That's it. They should at least win 2 of the next 3, if not all 3. And then that sets them up coming into the SDSU game at the end of the month in October. So,
well, and, like Garrett Meyer mentions, the last time when they went up in Fargo, they ended up having a losing season, like
5-6, I think.
With the way this conference schedule lays out and them winning this game, I guess stealing would be not the correct.
I think that's a fair analogy. I know they won, but it's kind of like basketball. You go on the road, you are kind of stealing.
Right.
You don't especially in their situation where they are not
favored
yet at a level of SDSU or NDSU consistently. They were clearly better, but this was not a win you expected.
Yeah, I think it's fair to call it stealing the more I think about it. NDSU was favored by 21 and a half points. But, when I was looking at the rest of this schedule for USD, I've been calling them a playoff dark horse all year, and Ben's kind of been pushing back on me, going, well, where do you find that 7th win? The way this lays out for them, if they don't make the playoffs this year, that is
it would have been a bad failure.
Major
it would
choke if they don't make it.
Yeah, and I was also listening to some of the post game with USD, and we talked about Jimmy's post game. I mean, Nielsen's usually pretty dry. He never really gives you anything. He was practically crying on the field. I mean, I've never heard the man
potentially.
Yeah, I mean, well, one thing I was thinking about instantly, because it's been such a weird year over there. Obviously, we know David Herbster resigned right as we were going into the season. I don't know anything more about that. I don't really know what the process was with Bob last year, because that was a whole year saga. And, of course, it really culminated when they had that game against Northern Iowa where they got down 42-0 in the first half, and felt like a funeral. And then he comes in the press conference. Herbster just sits down and says he will be our coach. He kind of said he didn't like message board chat. It was a very weird press conference. And we still don't even know that he's actually been extended. They've never announced anything. I've heard differing things. I guess I'd have to do an open records check. So this could be his final year. I mean, when Joe Glenn went up there, it was his final year.
That's right.
But yeah, I mean, Herbster, somewhere I hope David Herbster really enjoyed today, because whatever his reason for keeping him, boy, if they could have blown it up, and that's what a lot of people probably wanted in Vermilion. If they'd have blown it up after last year, they would not have done this today. I'm sure Aiden Bauman and a lot of them probably go somewhere else. So, and of course, Bauman, we also forget his dad played before his dad became a quarterback. His dad was a baseball player at SDSU. I mean, if the quarterback situation weren't so set in Brookings, he might, I think they would have absolutely made a pitch for him to come up to Brookings. But obviously with Gronowski, you're good. Chase Mason, no one's complaining about that. So, and I'm sure Iowa State misses him right now, because obviously they didn't know Hunter Deckers was going to go gamble his career away, but
literally,
but yeah, I mean, and then the other thing I will say this, their defense is a lot better. I haven't talked enough about how good their defense was. The other key I said, along with not getting steamrolled right in the first drive, was have to keep them under 200 yards rushing. You have to keep them. Like every other game they've lost, they gave up 300, 400. I mean, those are absurd. But if you hold the bye, the byes are going to run for yards, because it's all they do. They don't have a dynamic quarterback this year to like a Wentz or a Lance who can really push it down the field with the pass. The byes are going to probably get between. If you can keep them under 200, you've got a pretty good chance to win that game. And they held North Dakota State to 189, and that's how they won when they won in 2015. Held them under 200. So,
well, I think that's like around the magic number for all the games SDSU's beaten NDSU is what, 180? Is it?
Yeah, it's
something like that.
If you keep them between 1 and 200, I think you got them. You've got a pretty good shot, especially now, because again, as we maybe talk a little more about NDSU and where this puts them. I mean, they tried to. You could see what they were doing in the non-conference, and right. I think Dan Furman says it. They're a team that's not built to come from behind. Right. Not if they don't have a Wentz or a Lance, or the real big weapons that they used to have at receiver. Like when you had to respect the fact that Wentz or Lance or even Stick. I mean, I got to give Easton Stick credit. He became a much better passer as he went on. Mm-hmm. In fact, he's an NFL player still. If you told me that right now, granted he's going to back up, but still, I never thought that guy was going to be in the NFL. Mm-hmm. And if Cam Miller's in the NFL, he must have pictures on someone, or people just don't do their research anymore. It's like I'm not trying to diss the kid. He's not as bad as Bison fans make him out to be, but he should not be an NFL quarterback in another year or two. It's like if he gets to the NFL, it's pretty much just because it's reputation of the Bison at this point. But
yeah, how's that panning out for the last one though?
Yeah, that's you can make a case that Easton Sticks had the best career. He hasn't even played yet. He rides behind now that's a terrible job to be sitting behind Justin Herbert and cashing a paycheck, But the Bison, like I said, they only had 6 possessions in this game, 3 in each half. But their drives are, again, opening drive, 10 minutes. You only get a field goal. The next drive, they held it for 3 minutes. They had a pick. They punted the next drive, and that went 3 minutes. So they're not even going 3 and out, and they're still taking time off the clock. It's like that non-conference schedule, technically, I think it looks good. Eastern Washington's been a little better, but those teams don't match up with a lot of Valley teams. They're not – this isn't Eastern Washington of Vernon Adams and when they won a national title a couple of years ago. They're rebuilding. Central Arkansas, I mean, they have the old Will McElvain, who was the UNI quarterback, who got supplanted by Theo over at UNI. I mean, those are decent teams, but those are ones you would expect any good Valley team to run through, at home especially. And I guess one of them was at US Bank Stadium too. So and you could see the way they were trying to pass so much and try to – You can see it with these teams in non-conference. They're trying to put this stuff on tape to get people to respect it. When USD beat Lamar, they ran almost exclusively after not having any running game the first 2 weeks, and they barely passed with Bauman at all in that game. They wanted to get momentum for their run game, but then you're trying to give everybody else something to respect. You're trying to give tape for your rivals in the league to say, hey, we can run the football too. This is, this NDSU's non-conference was saying, hey, look at how creative our offense is. Cam's better. We've got this package with Cole Payton that's going to be great. And, I mean, I will say that Cole Payton actually looked fairly good. If the Bison don't turn around, you might see there's going to be more calls, I think, to play Payton, even though Miller's, I feel for the kid because he's kind of always on the hot seat there. Right. It was always supposed to be, they poo-poo that spring season, but if not for that spring season, they'd be up a creek because their Virginia Tech transfer never panned out. The Iowa State transfer never panned out. Cole Payton has yet to pan out. As much as they try to discredit what happened in the spring, they wouldn't have won a national title the next year if Cole Payton hadn't, or if Cam Miller hadn't started playing in that spring season. So, but yeah, they just second half again, they get even when they score a touchdown, 12 plays, 89 yards, 7.5 minutes. Mm-hmm. And you're down 21-3. It's one thing if you're winning, the next series, 16 plays, 80 yards, 9 minutes, field goal, 12 plays, 75 yards. These are great, but you need some quick strikes occasionally, and they just don't have that capability. And their defense got worn down a bit by USD too. The Coyotes went on an 8-minute field goal drive after it got 21-13. I mean, once they kicked that field goal, NDSU was in deep trouble. They kind of sat back a little bit in prevent, and the Bison got a quicker touchdown there in the final minute. But I mean, at that point, you need an onside kick, which they didn't. You seldom have. I mean, this year especially, they are not built to be a team that's playing from behind.
Well, and somebody earlier pointed out that these rules are killing the clock change.
Good point.
It's not that they can't come back or anything, but in the past they probably win this game with the old clock stoppage rules, because every time they get
you're stopping it on first down, and
they probably get an extra couple minutes of game clock.
Good point.
And I mean, they came right up to the edge of catching them. So you give them another couple minutes with the style offense, they might have been able to do it. It's going to make it a lot more difficult now for them to try to come back on teams, and they're not particularly good at it from the jump.
And I think the other question I do have, though, is does that say a lot about where the Bison coaching, how much confidence they have? I mean, the clock rules, but there still wasn't a lot of sense of urgency. Even that last touchdown drive that went quick, they still were kind of not really, from what I was seeing, they weren't really taking deep shots. And I mean, I know I jokingly said Cam Miller can't throw deep. We saw him throw a long touchdown last year to Lupke against SDSU. It was like they might have won that game because he had another long pass, and they did the bow and arrow thing, which got the 15-yard penalty, which kind of turned the game around last year with SDSU. He's not just because he's not Wentz or Lance doesn't mean he can't. I don't understand how you don't try to push a little bit, because again, when you're
I don't think their
Mathis
coaches understand how to. I don't think their coaches understand how to play from behind, because how many times have they been behind since Wentz got hired? They never do. So I don't think they understand how to coach that way.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I've read some of the Fargo stuff, and they're already. I know their columnist McFeely up there said this looks more like a 7-4 team.
Yep.
They're
in danger. It's a real thing.
Well, if they don't win out, they're not getting a seed.
Nope.
I don't think. I think maybe they could get a seed with 2 losses if they lost to South Dakota State. And again, it's still a rivalry with the Jacks. You still can't, the inclination right now. I'm sure SDSU fans, we're going to kick their ass, but obviously SDSU will be coming off that USD game, so that'll be who knows what kind of a toll that might take. Even when, regardless of if they win, lose, win by a bunch, don't. The Bison are going to throw everything they have after losing, the losing streak they're on right now in the series. But I mean, next week the Bison go to Missouri State. That should be a win. But even last year they almost lost at Indiana State.
Right.
Then in 2 weeks they go to North Dakota. I think that will tell a lot about what's going to happen to them. Because I mean, if the Fighting Hawks don't do it in 2 weeks, I don't know if they're ever. I don't know when.
Right.
They almost did it a couple of years ago. I think they lost like 12-7 to them in Grand Forks a couple of years ago. I still, Bubba's team's not ready to compete with a SDSU right now, but he's got the right idea. He's trying to build a physical team. They're not, they kind of got away from their identity when they were in the Big Sky, just what they were when they were in the NCC and they won. And when they hired Schweigert from Duluth, they kind of got back to that. But I mean, if that game in 2 weeks, I think will tell a lot about what's going to happen to the Bison. Because if they're right now, they look like a team that I think 7-4. Jordan is saying that they still have to. I mean, they end at Northern Iowa. That's always a tough game. They also have to host Southern Illinois. Southern Illinois is looking really good. That's the one other team that maybe is starting to feel like a sleeper now because they're at least in position. We'll see if they can actually do it. Well, I'll mention a few more scores later, but yeah, I mean, there's right now. If you can't take care of USD on homecoming at home, I wouldn't feel that confident going to Grand Forks, Brookings, or Cedar Falls.
Right. Do they play Southern Illinois in Fargo?
It is in Fargo. That's November 11th. They go Missouri. They're next 2 are on the road. They're at Mo State. They're at UND. Then they'll come home for 2 layups. They'll have Western Illinois and Murray back to back before they come to Brookings. But the end of their schedule is tough. They go at SDSU, Southern at home, and then at UNI. I mean, again, and they just, but like I said, I wouldn't get too far ahead because we've seen them drop a fluky game and then, come back. But they've got some real problems, and I don't know that they're going to solve them right away. But
if they drop the UND game, they've got to start sweating, because then you're at Brookings for the marker. You've got Southern Illinois, and then you get end of season UNI, which is a whole different animal than start a conference season UNI. That would be wild.
I'll say this: I don't think they're getting in at 6-5. If they were to go 6-5, I mean, we've seen it happen. It's not out of the realm, but I don't think their non-conference wasn't as bad as others. But I don't think there's anything that's going to jump off the page if they don't get at least. I mean, if you were to lose to, if you lose, basically if they go 6-5, that means they'll lose to UND, SDSU, SIU, and UNI. I don't know that that's likely, but that would mean ending the season on a 3-game losing streak. They're not getting in at 6-5. No. 7-4 gets them in, I think. But I mean, right now, they look to me like they're destined for Thanksgiving weekend. I think there's no way they're getting a home. There's no way they're getting a top 2 seed unless they win out. And even then, I don't know. With what Montana State's doing, with I guess Montana State and Idaho will play each other, so somebody will drop themselves out of a top 2 seed. But yeah, they would have to win out, I think, to get a seed at this point, a good seed. And right now, I think they're kind of destined for Thanksgiving weekend. And it's been we haven't really seen them much on the road in the playoffs, so that'll be an interesting animal. They only had only in the spring year when they had to go to my new friends at Sam Houston State,
right?
Who I made a lot of friends with by insulting the greatness of Conference USA.
No, you were right on point with that, though.
The expensive FCS conference.
That thing is, you told me, I think, Brendan, that it's like their media deal, like SDSU is making more as an FCS team from its, I mean, that's another thing we can talk about later. I mean, I'm sure it won't be on all night, but yeah, it's just that deal. And not even as much that they went, but it's like, how do you not have anything in place to renovate your stadium right now?
Right.
You're in Texas. No one's expecting you to go compete with UT or Baylor or TCU, but there are high school stadiums that are better than that. There are D2 stadiums in Texas that are better than that. And I looked, I saw something like the only renovation I've seen is like they have like these weird little terraces on top of the berm. They want, like, that just looks stupid.
Yep.
I mean, it's like somebody else said to me, no D1 school should have a running track around it. And I tend to agree. 100%. And I also think you shouldn't have that many berms. Like, right. at least paint some logos or something, or let people sit in them. But yeah, it was Sam Houston's it was fun teeing them up a little bit the other night.
That's a fun question from Zach. The biggest potential surprise national championship contender, excluding Montana State, SDSU, and Idaho. Whew. With how the FCS is imploded today, that's tough.
Yeah. Well, I guess we can get to that. Yeah. I mean, I guess wrapping up the rest of the Valley, by the way, the other game I said to keep an eye on this morning, it turned out to quite the shootout. Youngstown and Northern Iowa. Northern Iowa had to have that one at home, and they win 44-41. So, but that keeps them alive. I mean, if they'd have gone to 1-3, I think they'd be hard pressed. Theo Day and the Youngstown quarterback both went over 300. So, I mean, I think Jacks have to go to Youngstown. Those 2 road games with Youngstown and Southern Illinois are a little scary, especially SIU, because we know what SIU did the last time they played SDSU. But either way, that's a big win for Northern Iowa. That at least keeps them, I think, in the playoff conversation. Southern Illinois, a little closer than expected, 33-20 over Mo State at home. Nothing impressive, but they're 4-0. And in the battle of the bottom feeders, congratulations to Murray State. They have their first Valley win. They beat Indiana State 30-28. So, yeah, and no Western Illinois, so we were spared watching them move 1 week closer to their end here by losing to somebody else. So,
Fun
That's
fact
the way-
about Murray State, they have a horse with a jockey ride around their track when they score touchdowns, which is
Wow.
I don't know how the track team allows that, but then it's just absurd on every level.
That's a nice touch, but when you see their stadium and I think that, like you said, I think they have a running track around it too, right?
So the horse
Maybe the
runs
horse.
on.
I think that would kind of hurt the horse's feet, especially if it were hot on the whatever the asphalt is. But it's about the only good thing they've really had going for them with football for the last decade or so. But I mean, hey, if they play Western Illinois, they'll end up with 2 wins in the Valley this year, so that's probably better than most people anticipated. It's something. It's not much, but it's something. But yeah, you were talking about these upsets we had today in the top, really the top 10. Unfortunately, the one thing I hate about the ESPN ticker is they don't actually put the rankings. It shows you how much they care about the FCS. Montana State really didn't have any problem with Portland State, 38-22. So they're going to be number 2, obviously, now with the Bison dropping off. Idaho, I think Jason, I've said it. I will beat that drum. That guy's for real. I think they'll be 3rd. They have to be.
Yeah.
Idaho took care of business today. They won at Eastern Washington 44-36. The upsets we had were William and Mary, the Tribe. Great nickname. What were they? I think they were maybe 4th or 3rd. No, they were 4th, I want to say.
In the polls?
They're 5th in the poll, I believe.
Yeah, they lost. I always forget what conference they're in, too. I think it's the
Colonial
CAA
Athletic
now. Well, what one is it?
The CAA. Sorry, it's the Coastal Athletic now.
Yeah, that's right. William and Mary loses 14-6 on the road to Elon. Gave up 2 fourth-quarter touchdowns in that game. So they're going to take a bit of a tumble, although Elon's not bad, but and I think William and Mary's missing one of their top running backs right now, so they're a little banged up. And then somebody else saw it down here, Holy Cross, losing to, I believe they lost. Did that go final? Did they lose to Harvard?
They did lose to Harvard.
Yep.
Wow.
That's
Wow,
tough.
was right.
Well, I mean, on one hand, that is kind of surprising, but that was the knock on them before we saw them come up here last year. Was they just don't play in a great conference. I mean, that's typically you don't see a whole lot of teams coming out of the Patriot League that are actually national title contenders. But yeah, I mean, they lose to the Crimson 38. I wish we could get there. I do wish the Ivy League teams would send a team into the playoffs. That would be. It'd be better than the Pioneer League at the very least.
100%.
It'd be better than I think they'd be 4th or 5th best conference.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's scholarship either. I don't think they do scholarships for football. Though.
They're not, but they get academic equivalencies. Like those guys aren't paying full ride to go to Harvard. They're not.
Yeah. Yeah. You're saying it's a little more expensive than the tuitions for South Dakota State or
A smidgen.
Colorado State or USD or.
Well, I know
Dakota
specifically from a friend who went, like if you go to Cornell and your family's income is below X amount of dollars, you go for free. So, I mean, that's a pretty easy way to get people in without scholarships. But like, hey, you qualify here academically, welcome to the football team. So,
I'd kind of love to see I'd love to see SDSU shoot. I mean, I don't know how I would get highlights because I don't think anybody actually shoots their games. But I remember St. Thomas went there a week ago, I think, and I think they got drilled. But they play in like the oldest stadium, one of the oldest stadiums in all of North America for football or anything, I think.
and it's huge.
Yeah, it's like a mausoleum. It's like a coliseum.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like kind of like something from Rome almost.
Right.
And yeah, I'd love to see like SDSU or USD play a game there, just for fun. I mean, that would be, I'm pretty sure they would both. You'd think they would both take care of business. You never know with USD. I'm pretty sure SDSU would take care, but yeah, I mean, it'd be neat. I think it'd be neat to go play up there and just have that experience as opposed to, but obviously you want to get home games with those Pioneer League teams. So, and Harvard too, but do a 1-1. I remember SDSU was supposed to go to Drake not that long ago. Actually, that game got moved or it got, I don't know. Yeah, they were supposed to play at Drake a couple of years ago, and I think they had some stuff get moved around. But So they were willing to go down, which again, Drake sucks, but they do play at they play at the Blue Oval, which is another really old stadium. That's where they hold the Drake relays. And it's kind of a cool place. I mean, it would have been kind of I remember USD played down there in Streveler's one of his years, and they put up 77. So, you go down, you have a nice time. They obviously recruit Iowa a lot. It would have been a good show. It's a blue oval, so it kind of matches the uniforms. It would have been a nice little recruiting party for SDSU potentially just to put on. But, yeah, just some of those things are, Holy Cross, Zach McKinnell saying 5 turnovers, shot themselves in the foot over and over again. I mean, that kind of sounds a little familiar because when they were up here, before SDSU really put the pedal to the metal, I mean, they had chances in that SDSU game, and they just didn't quite, whether they missed a field goal or they, that pick 6 with Freeman that came back. If any of those plays turn around, maybe they're in a position to win that game in the fourth quarter or withstand that run that SDSU ended up going on to put it away. Because I think it was tied going to the fourth this past year. But I don't know how. Like Holy Cross legitimized themselves a little bit last year, but it's still a bit of a challenge when you're in the Patriot League and you're just not playing that level of team, and then when you have to step up and, I give them all the credit for what they did with SDSU a year ago because they played SDSU better than anyone else in that playoff run. It was not close, but can you really sustain that for 4 weeks, especially if you have to go on the road for a couple of them?
Right. And that's what kills them here is now that they're not getting a seat now after you lose like that when you're coming from that week of a conference. So they're going to go on the road and it'll take 2 or 3. And I think they could grab a game or 2 depending on matchups, but they're not going to. At first, I thought maybe depending on matchups, they could be a semifinal team, maybe if they got the right draw. Now it's like maybe quarterfinals with the right draw because you're going to be going on the road eventually to SDSU or to Montana State, and it's just not going to go well.
Yeah, and I was going to say I want to look a little more at the Big Sky because I've seen some people mentioning scores. Sacramento State, who got knocked off a week ago, they survived today at home, 31-30 over Northern Arizona. That was by the way, they're still not playing Carson Camp, just for anybody who's wondering. He's still riding the bench. They have another transfer by the name of Caden Bennett, who I'm guessing they had a competition, and he won the competition. He's a pretty good dual threat guy. But, yeah, Northern Arizona's they're not going to make the playoffs. But they've had kind of a nice little run of late, and they look like they're improving. They got a good young quarterback somebody mentioned on here. The other thing that kind of stands out to me, we've talked about this because I know you guys have made the point that NDSU's been a little overrated, to put it mildly. But there's still the Bison. I mean, I don't know who that one guy was who kept voting them number 1. But I'm guessing he's going to do it out of principle this week or not. But
I just saw his vote. He just posted. It was Brian McLaughlin. He does not have NDSU at number 1 anymore. It reminds me of another big national guy, Craig Haley, who's part of Stats. He runs the Stats media poll, the whole big media poll everybody follows, and I had a hissy fit about last week because of people still ranking Montana after losing to Northern Arizona. I think it was when last year when we won the championship. At one point, I was like, "How do you have NDSU here after that game?" And he goes, "Because it's NDSU," and I wanted to run it up his ass so bad after SDSU won that national title, and I forgot to bookmark it, so I couldn't, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I'm not going to say anything about other media members. That's not really a good thing. I've had some good conversations with Craig, and I think, hey man, that guy does a lot of work for a subdivision that does not get a whole lot of people who do a lot of work for it. So, like I said, you're not going to hear me go on here and say anything untoward about another media member or anybody else here in town. Like I said, I kind of enjoy cheesing Izzo and the Bison people a little bit just because they're so gotta go FBS.
Right.
But that's just fun. I don't know if they enjoy it, but But speaking of that, but like I was saying, we've talked about NDSU being a little overrated. Montana stayed in that poll last week after that loss at Northern Arizona. I think they were 25th Were they 25 in both? Or I know they were 25 in one of them, and I don't know if they were. What was the other?
They were number 18 in the stats poll after losing to NAU.
Yeah, Montana.
That's why I threw a fit, and I was mad because I don't need to do that again.
And we'll not. Well, point is, today they were back home at the Mecca of FCS football, as their announcer likes to say. Which I'm not knocking. I worked out there for about a half a year, and Washington Grizzly is as advertised. Like, if you can go watch a game there, especially when it's still in the fall like it is now, beautiful place. But it's about all Montana has right now. I mean, it is the history and the stadium. They played Idaho State today, and fun fact, is coached by Cody Hawkins, who is Dan Hawkins' kid, who was also that was his quarterback at Colorado and his offensive coordinator at Davis, and now he's the head coach at Idaho State. Point of the matter is, Idaho State's 1-4 this year. They got, I think the last time we saw them, they got boat raced by UND in Pocatello. And I got to give them credit. They almost won at San Diego State. They lost to the Aztecs 36-28. But then Utah State dropped 78 on them. And then Northern Iowa beat them 41-17. They did beat Northern Colorado last week for their first win, but that's really not saying much with Northern Colorado. So they go to Missoula, and you would figure it's going to be, okay, this is where the Grizz get right and beat them by a couple touchdowns, go home. No, 28-20. Montana hangs on and escapes with a victory. Just trying to pull up the scoring summary. Pretty much, I mean, this was a 4-quarter game. This was not, there wasn't a, late run by Idaho State. It was tied after 1. Grizz were up 7 after 3. Idaho State got within 1, and they must have missed a point after. They got within 1 in the 4th quarter, and then Montana got a TD. But I don't know how they're still showing up in this poll. I mean, to be fair, there aren't maybe that many good teams at the bottom of the top 25. But
my thing is, if you're a top 25 team after, say you're giving them the benefit of the doubt from the Northern Arizona game. If you're a top 25 team, you've just gotten drugged nationally by everybody as the poster child of someone who shouldn't be ranked and is a bad team, and you're actually a good team, you would go out and you would beat Idaho State like they punched your mother. Instead, that's a good one. This on at home, like, my God, you're just not a good team.
And again, I'm not going to pretend I'm not the expert. I only worked there for 6 months. I enjoyed it. I would have stayed. I had an opportunity back in Des Moines that came out of nowhere, and I left. If there's one regret I kind of have, I wish I would have spent a little more time in Montana because it's so nice. I mean, it's just God. I mean, some of the drives I would take on a Friday night to a high school football game, I'm just like, this is unreal. Going through the mountains, but. Although at the same time, I was making. I'm not going to say what I made, but it would have been very tough to live very long in Missoula on what I was making. But I'm not the expert. But they brought back Bobby because when I got out there, Hawk had just left. I got out there in 2010. I had come from Fargo. At this point, they're still in the middle of that 25 straight playoff runs, years of making the playoffs. And, of course, they won a national title with Joe Glenn. He left. Hawk took over. They were probably better under Bobby Hawk because he got to a couple national title games. He just couldn't quite finish the deal. And he goes to UNLV. Nobody wins at UNLV. He stinks, gets fired there. Meantime, Montana, what really kind of first wrecked them was they had that sexual assault thing, the rape things that went on.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, that was under the guy who replaced him. It was his offensive coordinator. His name was Robin Pflugrad. And the year I was out there was the first time they actually missed the playoffs. They just didn't really have that good of a team. Their quarterback got hurt. Chase Reynolds was terrific. It was like a Walter Payton kind of running back. Walter Payton Award finalist type running back. But they got good the next year. They were back in the semifinals, and it felt like everything was normal. That kind of wrecked their program. Then they tried the Bob Stitt thing from Colorado Mines. Of course, he memorably beat NDSU in his first game. And, full disclosure, they beat the Jackrabbits in the playoffs that year in that first round game in Missoula. but he never got him going. They tried another guy, and Bobby was supposed to be the return to glory, the return to, and Bobby, when he was there, all I ever heard, that guy was like swagger, arrogant. There were a lot of people who didn't like him. There were a lot of people who blamed the fact they had the rape cases and that kind of culture on what he did, because Montana players got in a lot of trouble too, and they just kind of looked the other way. But at this point, they were so desperate to get back to being Montana that they're like, come on back, bring back the glory years. I mean, he never even he would never acknowledge Montana State. Like, I don't even think he called them by name back when he was, the head coach. He just tried to delegitimize him. And it's just, I wonder if he's on the hot seat there. The glory day, I mean, it's been, I think, 3 or 4 years now. I know the COVID thing kind of wrecked him. And yeah, Garrett's saying he hasn't come to terms. That's another big thing too. When he was really successful, that they weren't seeding, I don't think they were seeding the playoffs, or at least not the way they are now. Montana could basically buy home games at that point, because and again, to their credit, 25,000 a night, they sell the place out. But it was a different thing. And then, of course, the other half of it, too, was the Big Sky probably regrets not bringing in SDSU and NDSU when they had the chance. Because those two ended up they couldn't imagine those two would shift the power away from the Montanas. But, imagine if SDSU and NDSU are in the Big Sky. That's kind of a rising tide floats all boats there. At least then you're competing head-to-head with them, and maybe you knock them off a few years until they get good again. Now they just built it, and now they've just shifted that power away that was in the Rocky Mountains over there. He's got to be on the hot seat, because they're not – the glory years ain't coming back. They're just not. And even then, too, he used to schedule a lot of – their non-conferences used to be so bad. They always scheduled, like, D2 teams, and, they were the things they typically didn't have to worry about because they won the Big Sky easily. But even this year, they had a D2 team. It was a defending national championship team. Beat them 17, almost lost to them. I remember when the Bison were making that transition, they went up there in 2003, still as a D2, 2000, whatever it was, still as a D2 team, and they beat Montana. So, yeah, the Grizz they've been reaching for the old glory, and I just don't think it's ever coming back. Not with Bobby. I mean, someone will get that program going, but
they're the Nebraska of the Rockies.
Good one.
Oh, I love that.
I wasted all that hot air, and you summed it up in one very eloquent sentence right there.
I think that's about it for me too.
Yeah, we should probably wrap this up here pretty soon. We've been we had a lot to talk about today, man. I thought it'd be kind of a surprising week, and well, it certainly was. Montana fans will not be patient with mediocrity. They're and they shouldn't be. That program should be at the level of SDSU and NDSU, and especially now with James Madison and Georgia Southern and App State gone, there's no excuse for that. And now in Montana State, their schedule moving forward here, they could go 0-2 the next 2 weeks. They got to go to Cal Davis, who is still kind of wishy-washy, but I would say they're better than Northern Arizona. And then 2 weeks on ESPN2, pray for them, because I think Jason Eck's going to want to make a statement in the Kibbe Dome on national TV. If Jason Eck can put up 50 or 60 on Montana,
he's going to do it.
I don't think he's calling off the Dogs.
No. Then I'll giggle the whole time. I'm going to be honest.
And then they also have Sacramento State at home, and then they do get Montana State at home, which you never know what can happen in that rivalry. But yeah, that to me looks like they're similar to the Bison right now, maybe 7-4 team. 6-5's not getting in. We'll see. And then, and the one last thing I'll touch on, because I mentioned this to Brendan last week. We know SDSU did not have an FBS game this year, which kind of sucked. But they do have a couple more scheduled. I mean, you never know what's going to happen with conference realignment. Next year they're going to Oklahoma State, which most people kind of know him for "I'm a Man, I'm 40." Gundy, the coach, which is that I think that rant's now 10 years old.
It is.
But they didn't play this week. But Oklahoma State, that's looking more and more like another game SDSU could pick off next year.
Mm-hmm.
They last week they go to Iowa State, who we've kind of mentioned the problems they've had. I mean, the Cyclones just did not look competitive, and Iowa. Now, to be fair, Iowa State beat them when they were number 1 at one time too. So it's never been going to Ames is never an easy trip. But Iowa State beat them 34-27. The week before that, they lost at home to South Alabama 33-7 at home to South Alabama. And their stadium is they really didn't beat Central Arkansas by that much either. It was only a 14-point game. I mean, I'm hoping I can make that trip because I know T. Boone Pickens was basically the sugar daddy over there and put in all the money. They've got a great stadium setup. I don't know anything about Stillwater, but they're going to play Kansas State next week. I mean, they're looking like they're probably going to be a 4-3 win team, maybe 5 at most. A couple of years ago, I might have said that wasn't a winnable game for SDSU, but man, the Jacks will look a lot different next year potentially. But how confident would you guys feel right now? This year's team, I'm sure you'd feel confident. Is this another one we should have on the quote unquote upset alert?
It's going to depend, right? I mean, you don't know what transfer portals and Isaiah Davis possibly going to live in the NFL draft, all that stuff. But I think overall, I'd still feel good about it.
Yeah, I mean, Davis is pretty well gone. He's basically told everybody he's going to do NFL draft. I don't foresee. There's other ones too. I mean, you wonder if, especially if they win another national title, does Gronowski? I can't imagine somebody in the Big Ten, especially in Illinois, wouldn't say, "Hey, we suck. Why don't you come play? Would you like to play in front of your hometown fans or whatever?" Amar could be another candidate for the portal didn't hit him hard this time, but it's going to happen eventually. I love their culture and I understand all that, but unfortunately, it's the business right now. They'll have a year where they get hit hard by the portal, especially if they keep winning titles. But next year, I mean, I like what we're seeing out of Chase Mason early. That would be it. If Chase had a debut as the starter in Stillwater, that's a tough. It's still not quite. It's still not as bad as going to Iowa or Nebraska in terms of crowd noise. If this program reloads right now, Oklahoma State's not in a great place. I think the next couple of FBS games they have Northwestern in a couple of years.
Right.
They're opening I think that's actually Northwestern's new stadium that they'll be opening. So they're probably going to spoil that. I feel pretty confident whoever's out there at that point. A couple more games with Nebraska. Who knows where they're going to be? I think they have an Iowa State game. Cyclones look like they're kind of regressing. It's very smart. They're not trying to hit the home run with Georgia they're not going to pretend that they're going to go out and play with Georgia and Alabama, but keep taking the winnable ones while you can.
Actually, Power 5 ones that'll pay.
Yeah. And who knows how many more of them they're going to keep getting. But, it is well after midnight. Somebody said the last time Bobcats of Montana State played Oklahoma State, they lost by 3. So, yeah, I do want to – Gundy's kind of a trip. I don't think he's quite as rowdy as he was when he made the I'm 40 thing, but that's still an all-time soundbite. That's got to be –
100%.
I don't know if it ranks above the playoffs one from Jim Mora back in the day, but
it's up there.
I don't even think – I think the kid who he was defending said he didn't even like him that much. So might have been more of a show than an actual defense, but yeah, I think we kind of come on these things not planning to do much, and then we end up going an hour plus. So,
every time.
Even when we talked about Drake, I still don't know how we stretched an hour out of Drake.
He's got a lot of albums,
Fair. On that note, I think we call it a week. We will all be back. Hopefully. Thanks for the comments. We had a pretty good section today. That was obviously it was a very intriguing day. And 2% or whole milk tonight.
Whole milk every time.
I was going to say you never drink 2%. Ron, you should know that by now.
Whole milk is lies. Yeah, Ron, you know better. There's 2 things I hate in this world. It's liars and skim milk, which is water lying about being milk.
As always, thanks for having me on board, guys. This is fun, and I know you guys are gonna have a lot of great coverage with the week ahead, rolling out your previews, reviews of this week, and moving forward. So keep an eye on that. Of course, if you're out there, keep an eye on Dakota News Now because we got the best highlights. We'll have plenty of sound and stuff throughout the week as we roll into Illinois State. Certainly, any others, if you want to keep an eye on everybody else, we will. We also had the fact CSU was winning. I will add on that.
Yeah, Zach was
Didn't
watching
quite end the way I
game there,
wanted.
right? He kept doing this, like, oh.
Yeah, I was up to. I full confession. I did not go to bed till 5 a.m. that night. I was wound. I was wound. I couldn't. They blew it. But
How do we end this one, Brendan?
All right, we got
to say bye.
Hey guys, see you next week.